Welcome, fiends, to Handle a Whisker, presented by the Slash Incast Podcast Network. Our show discusses horror movies and the phobias they emphasize. We have just wrapped up our Botanophobia deep dive here this past month as we looked at the fear of plants. And, we're pivoting for a little bit to focus on some of the newer releases for the genre before we deep dive into some more holiday horror movies, which, we got a new trailer for Violent Night earlier today. It was actually airing on TV, and I saw it. I was like, oh, yeah, but this is a movie coming out. It's like the first week of December, so who knows? Maybe that'll be one of the first ones we tackle in December this year. But I'm your host, Totally Drunk, joined as always by my co-hosts Holly and John.
Hi,
guys, how are you doing tonight?
Hi.
Hey, good.
Yeah, you have to excuse John. He's a little nasally, but he's here, and that's the important thing.
He couldn't make it to the mansion.
I'm a little under the weather, so I have to quarantine
I hope
a little bit.
I didn't give you anything last week.
No, it's just a cold.
Okay, good.
But I just woke up with it on Sunday, and the scratchiness.
Well, I'm glad you stayed home then. Thank you.
Yeah, otherwise we were just going to lock you in the basement,
Yeah, you can record from there. It's spooky.
It'd be a much darker backdrop, though, in that case.
More Dahmery, less Haunted Mansion. Mm-hmm. Incidentally, have you guys been watching the Donner film, TV show? Dahmer?
No. I haven't been watching it, but I've heard it's been kind of a popular show. People are talking about it.
I'm a big fan of Evan Peters. You know what? I'm so sorry. I'm derailing the show already. Let's stay.
It's fine. No, it's fine. Yeah, I was just wondering if you're like, I'm a big fan of serial killers, and yeah.
And I want to be one? No, I do not, actually. No, I'm a big fan of Evan Peters. He's a really great actor. But I'm having a hard time watching the show. I think it's because they sexualize him so much that you're like, am I not supposed to hate Dahmer? I'm so confused right now. It's like, oh, poor Dahmer, and look, he's been working out. He looks so good, and you're like, he does look good. So the roller coaster ride is awkward, and so I haven't actually finished it.
Nice, sounds cool. But yeah, not surprising. True crime is really popular right now, and there is always that weird kind of what do you call it, groupies for serial killers, on the internet and stuff.
I wonder if he has man groupies, because that's what he was into. So, he died in 91, wasn't it? I wonder if he had past tense man groupies. That would have been nuts. I bet he did.
I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, we got people with cults behind him and everything. So I feel like the show's just like trying to induce Stockholm syndrome on people, even though you're not actually captured.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a weird angle, which is not. It's actually really popular. Like, you see that a lot, like the super sexy serial killer, right? But it's one thing to see fiction do that. It's a whole other thing to add it onto real life, and you're like, oh crap, this is creepy. So I think that's I'm glad that I still have those boundaries. I'll say that much. Look who's mentally well.
Well, that's something, I guess. So tonight, we are focusing on one of the new VOD releases. This one comes from Ana Lily Amipour, who had done the Bad Batch was their last movie. She also did A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which was a very unique, stylish black and white vampire movie. Bad Batch was more, kind of like steampunk-esque. But another good movie in its own right. So tonight we're discussing her new movie, which is Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon. Now, I will preface this. I would not categorize this as a horror movie, just based off of what we got in it. There are some elements that might be seen as horrific because it does kind of deal with the supernatural, which honestly wasn't really explained. In the movie at all with the Blood Moon, which I thought was kind of interesting. I felt like we were missing a piece there. But all in all, like right away, you're gonna know that this is one of Anna's movies based on her distinct indie style. Uh, really good soundtrack in this movie as well, very similar to what we have gotten in her prior two movies as well. But we really wanted to just take some time to check out a lot of new stuff, just because October, just in like this 2-3 week span, has so much content coming out, and it was really hard for us to like try to squeeze in everything in like a 4-week window.
Yeah, definitely. So I have to confess I've never seen any of her other movies, but now I really want to, uh, because this movie was really good. But I've been hearing a lot of positive things about those movies, but just never got a chance to see them yet.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen The Bad Batch, but I've seen A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. And that's actually that's her as a lead in that movie, by the way. And I was, this movie just came out, and there isn't a lot out there yet. Although there are some reviews already bouncing around. There's a couple of interviews with some of the actors and with the director, which are really telling. I really enjoyed the interview with Anna, though, because she. One of the big complaints that some people had about the movie was that they didn't feel like the narrative was complete, and they sort of I wouldn't say attacked, but they really put that as a shortcoming of her as a director, and she actually spoke to that directly, saying that everything was planned to the most minute detail. Like, she's not leaving anything out. This is exactly the story that she wanted to tell. Although I do feel like, when I left the movie, I really enjoyed it, but I did feel like I was missing something. But I guess that's the whole point, right? And there was even more of a sense of a closure in The Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. So for you, John, that movie is about a girl who's a vampire who's just kind of walking the streets. And is it set in Iran? Where is it set in?
I honestly can't remember. It's been so long, but it's funny because it's like all like throughout the movie, like she's seen as like a knight, a woman of the night,
Right.
basically, which of course has a double meaning.
Yeah.
In most cases.
No, I'm a child of the night. Thank you very much. So in that movie, it's she does the same sort of, well, that's her technique a little bit, which is you get this sort of sense of the everyday of the like you're just these her characters are walking through reality, and half of the time they're not, the reality sort of affecting them, and then half the time they're actually affecting their reality around themselves or around them. I don't know if that came out right, but like there's a lot of like wandering in her movies. So I like that, but it kind of leaves me feeling a little kind of empty, although it is very beautiful, and I do believe that that's her point.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that it didn't have the traditional story structure. But it ended up not mattering to me because the movie was good and I didn't get bored and it kept carrying along. I actually really expected it to, because a lot of movies like this will start strong like this does, and then we'll kind of lose steam halfway through. But I think this movie always maintained the same level, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Like, I don't think it ever really dropped down in terms of keeping the story moving forward and keeping the energy going. But at the same time, it felt like it never escalated either. You never got like kind of, I mean, I guess you sort of get the exciting kind of conclusion, but not quite. It kind of, the story just kind of moves along in the same way, and then it kind of ends. But I thought it was so good though overall that I was like, okay, I'm fine with this, even though I would look at the clock and there'd be like 30 minutes left, and it was like, this is not following the traditional like structure. It's not doing the normal things.
Or when they're very obviously nearing the end, and I stopped it to see what time was left. It was like, it's almost over. Is that it?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, okay,
And
wait.
incidentally, it's funny that you say, T, that you wouldn't categorize it as a horror movie. I'm afraid that I did lose Joe about 15 minutes in. So we just watched
Mhm.
Return of the Living Dead yesterday, I'm sorry, the Thursday. Yeah, Monday. We watched it Monday night, and so I think I couldn't explain to him what the movie was about because I couldn't quite remember, and so he kind of thought it was going to be more of a slasher thing, and
Ah, okay.
he got a little bored and he walked away. Whoops.
It. I mean, the thing is I watched the trailer, which makes it look like a
Right.
horror movie, and the first 15 minutes or 20 minutes feel like a horror movie, especially the opening in the insane asylum and what happens with the nurse and making the nurse stab herself and everything. It feels like a horror movie for sure in that beginning part. But then I was definitely thinking that about, halfway in, it was like, this is not really a horror movie anymore. This is more like an X-Men movie, like a dark X-Men movie.
Speaking of which, this director did direct an episode of Legion, so a little bit there.
I haven't seen that.
Oh,
I haven't
you'd
seen
love it.
that.
You should check it out. It's got your favorite actor from The Guest. That sexy
Nice.
serial killer that I'm into.
Hmm.
I,
Yeah,
and
and I will note too, like upcoming, she also does have one of the episodes for the new Guillermo del Toro miniseries.
She did a
nice,
Twilight
nice.
Zone, the new one, I think, right?
Yeah, she's got a couple of episodes with the
Yeah, and
Twilight
then
Zone.
I'm trying to think of what else. Like she's been pretty busy, so that's really cool. And I like her style a lot. I think I can't remember who in production was also working a lot with Ari Arster, whatever that dude's name is, or that.
From Hereditary,
Yes.
who did Hereditary, right?
And so, yes.
Great actor.
So, I mean, I think we can attribute some of the visuals to that person's artistic endeavors. So, yeah, the movie was beautiful. The soundtrack was awesome. I really, I overall really enjoyed it. So, I was glad I got to see that.
I have to say, in the very, very beginning, like literally the first 5 minutes of the movie, I was a little worried. In the first minute of the movie, I was sort of like, oh no. Because the way that it kind of comes in on this girl and she is in the straitjacket with no pants on and they have like the drool coming out and she's kind of making faces and they have the real wide angle camera. I was like, is this going to be like a goofy, edgy, like, but not in a good way kind of movie? Where, because I like the kind of crazy stuff, but when it's not done right and it's a little too edgy, it ends up just being kind of cringy,
Mhm.
And I was a little worried for the first minute that because I didn't know anything about the director or writer or anything. And I kind of was like, uh-oh. But then a funny thing happened, which is that they started playing the music from one of my all-time favorite bands, High on Fire, which they are on the soundtrack. I was blown away to find, because I recognized this song, but I recognized it in a way where it was like I couldn't place it. The music they play in the Insane Asylum when things start kind of going crazy before she escapes, and it's a different version of the song. And I was like, wait, this is so weird. I know this song really well, but I can't place it. And so I just paused the movie and look, and sure enough, it was High on Fire, and they're a really great band. So I was instantly like, oh, this is going to be
You're like,
awesome. High on Fire, that's crazy.
Sign me up for the
This
rest
is
of
awesome.
$6.
But it also got good really quick, so I was relieved. I was like, okay, this is good. But I swear that not to be like, I'm no prude by any means, but the choice to have her in no pants in the very beginning of the movie is so kind of blatantly like, check her out, and it's like, you would never, they don't do that, to people. As bad as those places are, they do give you pants, I think, usually at those places. But no, I shouldn't complain about that. Was the only reason at first I was kind of like, what is this?
I was with you where I thought
okay.
like for sure it was foreshadowing some sort of like sexual assault that was imminent. But I thought that was very sweet for the movie, that essentially everybody that she met, that she really interacted with, which would be Bonnie's son, Fuzz, was that that dude's name? Even Craig's character, who's, I can't remember his last name, and also I can't remember the character's name, but they were all either decent or straight up kind to her, which was really sweet, right? So it was, I mean, the person who got it the worst was Kate Hudson as Bonnie. Got beat up a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
That was rough. But so that was kind of refreshing that, usually in these movies, these characters are just dragged, right? So it was kind of nice not to see that directly, although some people did get it.
Oh, totally. That was definitely something that I noticed right away because it starts out the way that you think it's going to go, where the nurse treats her horribly right off the bat when he's abusing her. And it's kind of like, okay, yeah, of course. Like, that's what always happens in these movies, like in the Hollywood version of these movies. But then when she gets out and meets the metalheads,
the skaters,
the stoners,
the nicest skaters on the block.
Let's go for like $50 a pair. So it was not nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's realistic. That's the thing. Like Holly, what you were saying about the way the characters treat the main character is that the people in this movie act, I think, far more realistically than most other movies. Because in real life, like, there are obviously terrible people in real life who do terrible things. But for the most part, like, for instance, the first stoner metalheads she meets, in real life, those kids would actually act that way. They might not give her their shoes, but they wouldn't, in the traditional Hollywood version of this movie, they would have totally been like, well, they kind of tease her at first, and you think they're going to start being terrible to her, but then they're just like, oh, hey, like, once they realize there's something wrong and that she's kind of in trouble, they instantly want to help her.
Unlike the trio from The Guardian, those guys were terrible. I wanted to rape and kill a baby.
Yeah, they weren't like, where are her pants?
Well, that's totally what I was thinking too. Was The Guardian is like the perfect other side of the coin of how this movie would have been done normally, or like if it was a Hollywood movie, or if it was a movie that was made in the past, where they had to follow the more traditional tropes. It would have just been a series of people being terrible to her and then her killing them with her powers, But, and I love, there are a bunch of really funny, I don't know if it was just me, but there were a bunch of really funny lines that were kind of just like regular lines, but they were delivered in really funny ways. Like when they give her the shoes and the girl is like, to the one guy, she's like, give her your shoes. And he's like, oh, I know I have the smallest feet when he's taking them off to give them to her, because he's the one that should give her the shoes because his are most likely to fit her. But he was like, I have the smallest feet.
That was pretty good. I dug that.
And I also love how, like, throughout the movie, there's also kind of the run-in gag when it comes to Mona Lisa and wanting certain types of food. Because initially, right out of the gate, when she's leaving the mental asylum, it's the cheesy poofs. Then it becomes, like, the French fries or the hamburgers. But, like, she's so fixated on, just trying to replenish herself because obviously she hasn't had like been taken care of too well in this facility that she was at initially. But I thought it was really interesting that like okay, so she had her first taste of the cheese boost, then first thing she wants to do right out of the gate when she gets out is go find more. She needs to get more of that dust on her fingertips.
Mhm. Well, to my as someone who consumes tons of pop culture stuff, my mind my mind was immediately going to that idea of that you see in like superhero stories or in sort of those types of stories where somebody who has mental powers always has to be like eating calories to fuel their power, basically, and that using their power drains calories, and so they have to be like replenishing with junk food and sugar and things like that. Which I don't know if you guys have ever seen or read any of the variations of Death Note, but there's a character in that story who is like a genius level detective, and he's always eating candy because the calories help fuel his brain.
Yeah, maybe that's why I eat so much junk food. Thanks.
But that's kind of what I was thinking. But
that's
also,
what I was thinking. I was just thinking South Park the whole time.
She's never going to get junk food in an institution. She's very likely just getting like macronutrients, like just like here's your protein, here's your potato for carbs. So when you get out into the real world, you can eat some high quality junk food. So.
Like how they put the tube down their throat at the and we find out later in the movie that she was basically catatonic up until the point. So they were probably feeding her with like one of those feeding tube kind of things, like protein shake.
So I mean, I also really I enjoyed the interaction with Fuzz. I know the dude is creepy, but I mean at least he was kind, right? So I mean, again, you get the sense that he's going to try to attack her. But at the end, I mean, he was being a creep, but at least he wasn't holding her against her will, and it wasn't, forcing her to do stuff. He was just being way too sly and a little gross. But then he turns out to be nice, so that's cool.
That's another example where, when she runs into those guys hanging out in front of the Quickie Mart. In the traditional, version of this story, they would have instantly assaulted her, of course. But they don't. I mean, they tease her and they make comments and stuff, but nobody actually does anything to her, which I found to be, again, far more realistic in a lot of ways, where, like, not to get too into the weeds off to the path, but it's just like the fact that, like, again, the Guardian, it's like typically in these characters there would just be like no character to them other than they are here to attack the protagonist, and because of the fact that they're like hoodlum kind of looking characters, of course that means they're bad, But the writing in this movie is really good, and I was really impressed because they act like actual humans. They're not just there to be evil to the main character.
I mean, you had the drug dealer who actually gives her his shirt off his back.
He probably thought he was going to get something else.
Well, of course, but didn't work out that way.
Kate Hudson did a really good job in this movie. I thought she was really great. And I also, talk about reality. She's a single mom working heart of gold. But when she does throw her under the bus to try to get away from the cops, or from the cap, singular. Yeah, where the hell were freaking Craig's friends? Anyway, so that's also realistic in that she'll give you a lot of kindness, but self-preservation is still gonna be number one. And so,
Yeah, no,
oh no, that I was
no,
done with
go
that
ahead.
piece. I don't know if you want to add in more on the Kate Hudson.
Yeah, no, all the characters acted like
Except for the
real
frat boys.
people, where they weren't. Yeah, except for the frat boys. Although they acted like real frat boys, but no, but nobody in the movie, I guess, except for the frat boys, was fully bad or fully good. Most of the characters, did kind of bad things and kind of good things, and some characters did kind of better, more good things than bad things, and others did more bad things than good things. But yeah, it was cool that it wasn't just the stereotypes,
Right.
the standard tropes for characters. And it's like it even kind of plays around with it, where we think that character, what was his name, the main
Fuzz?
sleazy guy, kind of,
Fuzz.
yeah, Fuzz. We think
Yeah.
he's going to be bad for sure at the beginning,
Yeah,
especially
he's
when he's
luring
like trying
her,
to
right?
get
I mean,
her
he is
into
actively
his
luring
car.
her, to a more comfortable spot
For
for,
sure.
for sexy things to happen.
Mm-hmm. But then it turns out that he's not, so bad. He does basically kind of make her kiss him, but he's not like totally, forcing himself. There's that definite
that
like
kiss with some
sleazy
cheesy
element,
poofs.
but yeah, exactly. And he did give her his shirt, so. Oh, and he looked really familiar, and it was torturing me, so I had to stop and look. And he is the guy who plays. I don't know if you've seen the first Deadpool movie, but he's the main
Oh
villain
shit! Okay.
from the first Deadpool movie. The British guy, I think, is Francis or whatever, but and he's in other stuff too. He's actually a somewhat kind of famous up-and-coming actor. Yeah, he's British. Yeah, and doing his, I guess, like sort of a Florida accent, maybe, or something. But, yeah, do we know where
What's that?
takes place, by the way?
New Orleans.
New Orleans, right. Well, Kate Hudson, who was great, seemed to sort of be doing that sort of stereotypical New Yorker accent that you hear a lot, and so I was kind of like, I guess she could be a New Yorker who moved to New Orleans, but she's not really doing a New Orleans accent exactly. In fact, I don't know that any of the characters had a
Like
thick
nobody had a southern
New
drawl?
Orleans accent.
Is that what New Orleans sounds like? I have no clue.
Because of course, we didn't mention, I don't know his real name, but the guy from The Office who plays the cop, who is also really good in this movie, he didn't have an accent of any kind.
That's probably
he
for the best than try to make everybody use the same accent. Probably a good call.
But he was good, and I was glad he was in it throughout. I wanted to see more of him, because there were kind of sections where he disappeared for a little bit, and then he would come back. But I was actually worried that they would do that kind of low-budget horror movie thing where they bring in an actor that you know well, and you think they're going to be in the movie, and then they're in it for like 5 minutes, and you never see him again. I thought they were going to do that, so I was relieved that he was actually in the movie for the whole time.
Yeah, Craig Robinson had one of my favorite scenes later towards the third act, because I was just rolling at that part when he's talking to Charlie.
Oh yeah,
at the airport. When shit's really starting to hit the fan, but that's later on. But what I thought was really interesting about Bonnie's characters, obviously she's struggling as a single mother, and of course an opportunity arises for her to put herself into a better living position, not necessarily like better position for her and her son, because like that is a kind of a fractured relationship in its own right. Sure, she still cares about him, but Charlie's very independent in his own right. He's constantly left by his lonesome, basically. So seeing like that friendship start to flourish with Mona Lisa was an interesting like pivot in the actual story in itself. But of course, you know what Mona Lisa is capable of doing. So, the single mother's like, all right, this is a get rich scheme, so we can quickly make a ton of money. And then, of course, as a stripper, all of a sudden you have all these guys shilling out all this money. Then all of a sudden they don't have anything left.
Yeah.
So then all the other girls are not seeing any cash flow for them either. So that creates, some beef between the dancers as well, which I thought was really great because, of course, like, you're going to go all in. You're not just going to go 40% and then, just call it a day. No, you're going to take
that was a good scene. I like that. I mean, it took me a second to realize what was happening. I was like, she took all the money from all the dudes and they all walked out because they were broke.
It almost feels like it's like that monkey's
yeah.
paw kind of thing, where it's like she sort of figures out, she's like, I'm so clever and I'm going to use this to get all this money, and then instantly creates this situation where there's all these people out to get her because she ripped them off. And because the main character's power leaves the person completely conscious and aware of what's happening. So when she uses people to steal money, they remember what happened and what she did. So they hold a grudge against her, of course. And again, I think that's a really good part of the writing and the storytelling, where it feels like kind of like a fable, or like a fable or a fairy tale, kind of, where it's like, oh, like, here's this thing where you can get everything you want, or basically like the monkey's paw, you can get what you want, but there's going to be an equally negative thing that happens to you as a result of using it, and she, of course, ends up having some really bad stuff happen to her. And there's that other stripper I liked that scene where the other stripper comes up to her and is like, I'm not even mad at you, but karma is going to get you eventually because I know you're doing something messed up here. And then she doesn't, get like to this. I like the fact that we get these new kind of movies where things don't have to follow the standard tropes. Because again, it would be in the normal version of the Hollywood version of this movie, there would have been a fight between her and the stripper.
Or there would have been more of a showdown between Mona Lisa and a more violent sort of opponent, right? Which never really happened. I mean, it was a chase scene at the end, but she ultimately, with the exception of the nurse, she didn't, and very mildly with like Craig, where she got him to shoot himself in the leg. Those were the only really like violent parts that she was involved with.
I forget. Did she kill the nurse, or just the nurse just basically?
Well, I mean, she gets her to unhook her her straitjacket after she's already stabbed herself in the leg. Yeah, and then with the dude at reception, she just gets him to knock himself out, and that was it. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, basically she doesn't kill anyone.
Well, and then she has the part where when Kate Hudson's getting beat up by the woman at the fast food joint, sort of helps her out that way, which, like, I guess that's a good way to introduce, the characters. Although I was really happy how they introduced Craig's character in Mona Lisa, where he's just there to see to some drunk ladies by the Quickie Mart, and then has already heard a little bit about how there's a woman who's escaped from the institution, and clearly here's somebody who could really, be that person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when he's looking, what was
the character's name?
Right?
I keep calling him Craig. His actor's name. Harold.
It's Harold.
Harold. And I love how he has his leg brace on, and it's like they do an awesome thing where he's always like kind of hobbling around on his leg brace, and you can tell he's in a lot of pain because they always show him like drenched in sweat whenever whenever he's kind of run somewhere or moved somewhere, because it probably hurts a lot.
I did laugh a lot about the chase scene between Harold and Bonnie, and he's in a it's not exactly a cast. He's got a broken leg, I think, from the shot. I can't remember if he broke anything in. Right, yeah.
It's from shooting himself in the leg.
I can't remember how extensive the damage was to his leg. I know his kneecap was fine. But anyways, he's got a brace, and so he's hobbling, and she's in these ginormous shoes that are like 7 inches tall. So she's like making these little steps, and he's kind of hobbling, and they're going like they're weaving through the people in the middle of a busy street in New Orleans, and that was hilarious because they were moving so slowly, but he kept at them, and he did eventually catch up. So that was pretty impressive. Yeah, that was hilarious.
Yeah. But let's see what happened.
So at this
I don't want to jump ahead
we walked
too much.
Through the fact that Mona Lisa escaped from that institution she was in. She goes to a fast food joint, or she meets the skaters. She gets shoes. She meets Fuzz. She gets a shirt. She goes to the fast food joint, meets Kate Hudson, gets involved in a fight, then goes to the strip joint with Kate Hudson, manages to fleece the frat boys. I'm not sure if they were frat boys, but they were kind of dressed a little bit like that. They're not necessarily. Yeah?
I think they were. It seemed like they said they were. For some reason, I thought they were.
After that was the chase. Wait, no. They go back to Kate Hudson's house. They meet Charlie, I want to say. I kind of wish. What's that? I was going to say that the kid's character, I kind of felt like he was too mature for his age. I mean, I know that he's like the son of, a stripper who's, leaving him alone for long stretches of time. But, there's a lot of advanced pop culture stuff in his room, basically. Both his, or maybe I just don't know 10-year-olds very well, which is totally understandable. I don't hang out with a lot of kids. But I just thought like his drawing abilities were too advanced. His musical taste and the way that his room was decorated was too advanced. I would have believed that a little bit more from a 13-year-old. And I think that would have been a really interesting dynamic where like it's just a friendship, and because like I said, like I feel like a 10-year-old would be a little bit more, I don't know, like attached to his mom. Although this kid was.
Yeah, I mean most of the drawings too were like of half naked women. On top of that.
Well, his mom's a stripper, so he's drawing, and he has I feel like this is reading into it a little bit, but I feel like they were kind of saying that he has kind of a thing for pretty women because his mom is a stripper and he's around strippers a lot, and he has all these drawings of women who are probably like the women that his mom works with and stuff like that. And then when he meets the main character, he draws her and everything, and he's kind of got this, thing. It's like, I mean, obviously he's like a young boy, he's growing up, but it does feel a bit mature. It's also very like the movie obviously I think is supposed to take place in the modern day, I'm pretty sure. But his room is like got multiple Ozzy posters. It's got a Randy Rhoads poster, which is Ozzy's guitar. Yeah, it's 80s kitsch, basically. It's like Ozzy's 80s skating. There's a Suicidal Tendencies poster. It felt, it was all of a sudden like almost like Stranger Things level of 80s nostalgia.
He had very advanced coolness for his age. That's why I wanted to see him be a little bit older.
Yeah. But it could have come from his mom because she would have been the right age for that, and she probably was an Ozzy
it's funny,
fan.
at that point, Joe was still watching the movie with me, and the first thing he noticed was like, that's a Firebird! So he's got a, we're assuming is a fairly nice guitar as well for a 10-year-old. But it also, I mean, like, if we did a little bit of, mental gymnastics, you could say, like, well, if his mom's feeling guilty for leaving him alone so much at night while she goes to work, then it makes sense that she would try to fill that hole with a bunch of material stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she has money because they sort of seem to imply that even aside from getting more money with with Lee, Mona Lisa, that she probably made money even before that, because they show she's obviously very good looking. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, New Orleans, I think you can buy a house for a lot. I think is still relatively, although maybe not in that area. She seemed to live in the main area. It might be expensive, but probably a more affordable lifestyle in New Orleans than other places. But yeah, I mean, they have a nice house though. Exactly. They have a 2-story house. And that's the thing too, is like, she's not like a bad mom in the blatant, like, kind of obvious way. She definitely provides for the kid and gets him money and stuff and food. And he clearly is not like, lacking really in any way other than the fact that she doesn't really act like a real mom to him. She acts kind of like a friend or like
I thought
a sister or something.
Hilarious. This is just as an aside. When we meet Kate Hudson or Bonnie at the fast food joint, like, she doesn't look that great there, but by the time she's on stage, it's really working. I was like, wow, she looks fantastic. It was those awkward little shorts she was wearing, I think.
And there were some shots where she looked exactly like her mom, Goldie Hawn. It was crazy. It was like, wow, she's really like...
That was a little creepy, John. I know.
Well, no, but Goldie Hawn is a sex symbol from... And even kind of from my generation, more even.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
pretty much, right? Like Overboard, 80s.
Bird on a Wire.
What was she in?
House Sitter. First Wives Club. I'm a bit of a Goldie Hawn fan. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she goes back to the 60s even with
Private Benjamin, was it?
What do you call it? The Laugh-In. Oh yeah, Private Benjamin. All day. I saw that in the theater when I was a kid young. But yeah, so we don't really get much backstory. We start to get a little backstory on Mona Lisa, where we find out that her parents dropped her off at the asylum, right, and then she was just there for her entire life, pretty much. Because I was wondering, because the the cop character thinks that she's a demon, and she kind of acts like an alien in terms of not knowing anything about anything. But then they do at least explain that she was basically catatonic for most of her life, and her parents just kind of
I mean, like in the title of the movie is Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon. Maybe it was something between her age and the moon that triggered her abilities. Yeah, I mean, like, and again, going back to that interview with that director, she made a big deal about talking about how she likes the idea of when you're going out into the world and you're interacting with people, you don't immediately get everybody's backstory up front, right? You make assumptions based on what you're seeing, what you're hearing, mm-hmm. and then as you're getting to know them, and this is something that she mentioned in an interview that I saw recently, that as you're getting to know them, you create a better idea or a better picture in your head of people. And so, she was mentioning how that part was intentional in the movie.
I'm glad like this was set in New Orleans, because that kind of like played into the supernatural aspect too, because so much of New Orleans is kind of like based on the macabre, like the ghost tours and things like that. So it really played into the hand. In regards to like Mona Lisa and like the kid though, Charlie, when they were in the room like moshing, I was like, I was just waiting for like Mona Lisa's turn and for her to start like windmilling. And I was waiting for her to like just punch the kid accidentally, of course, but like that never happened. But didn't happen.
And that was he said a funny thing too, where she asks him what he's doing, and he says hashing, which is funny because I don't know about you guys, but I've heard the term hesher before, which is a slang term for somebody that's like a metalhead, like a stoner metalhead is a hesher. But I've never heard the term
Nope.
heshing as, moshing, kind of thing. But I thought that was kind of funny because I was like, oh, is that a thing? Do people say that?
Maybe we're just too old. That might be a new thing.
They were playing, I'm pretty sure if I remember right, that was another High on Fire song. So I was really happy to see that. But, and then, yeah, he sort of, and this, just to bring up, you mentioned the movie The Guest earlier. This movie reminded me a lot of The Guest, where you have that character who is the dangerous kind of character who could potentially kill anyone or be really powerful. And he comes in and kind of has a positive effect on the family and everything, and the kid. It kind of had that feel, and same with the kind of neon where it takes place in modern times, but it kind of feels 80s at the same time. That kind of similar feel to it, and that's what it kind of reminded me of those scenes, like the scene from Terminator 2, where John Connor teaches, like Arnold about, hasta la vista, dude, and then hasta la vista, like where the kid sort of teaches the robot or whatever about how to act more normal or be like a normal person. Which, of course, and I'm sure you guys were wondering, I didn't do any reading or looking about what her sort of explanation is supposed to be, like what her power is or, how things work. I kind of felt like the most basic, like kind of standard is that explanation is just that she's sort of like a mutant, basically. She has some strange. I don't know if they implied anything about how when she.
I thought there was an implication that she was from North Korea. So then there might be some sort of like weird government,
which is
maybe
where Kim Jong. Yeah, and that her parents like escaped from there, basically.
Well, it was kind of like she was seeing snippets of like the destruction on the news, so I think they were implying that like maybe she was a force of destruction, where she could like bring about a lot more damage than what she was actually doing.
Well, and definitely, that is definitely because I mean you can get that from watching it, where she could be so much worse and do so much worse than she actually does. And there's that definite kind of, they did a little. It's interesting you bring that up too, because it ties with where when the cop guy is trying to get her to put the handcuffs on, is trying to get herself or trying to get Goldie Hawn or Kate Hudson to put the handcuffs on her, and Mona Lisa says, like, you think you're powerful? Why? Because you have these, and holds up the handcuffs. That, it's kind of like that.
Right.
They're kind of making a commentary about like political, like power, like authoritarian power versus like the power of the people, or something.
Yeah, I guess the alternative would be maybe they would see Mona Lisa as kind of like a sleeper agent, so to speak. Maybe she's just been asleep for like these 10 years, and she's just now waking up.
Mm-hmm. But it seemed like there could have been that implication that some kind of experiment or something was going on, and her parents kind of took her away from it and brought her to the States. But then she went catatonic, and so they ended up just kind of dropping her off or whatever. But that something could have happened.
I'm really liking
that made her the way she is.
I'm really liking T's approach that maybe she was meant to be a sleeper agent, but her parents took her away and were unable to get her to a place where she could be homed properly. And so then as she became activated as a sleeper agent, she doesn't have handlers, and she didn't have a training to be destructive. And so she's just making her way through the world, and with more power than what people think she has.
Yeah. which they showed that they tried to do. They tried to get her
Right.
into foster homes, and she kept getting rejected
Neat.
from foster homes. So yeah. Almost, I mean, and not to, this movie is very different from Stranger Things, but kind of that Stranger Things, as where with 11, where maybe she was, some kind of experiment gone awry. Like, as you're saying, T, where, she was meant to be some kind of weapon, basically, that the government is creating. And then, the kind of, it brings in that kind of free will and choice thing where just because she has this extreme power that could be really destructive, she pretty much chooses not to use it in that way because she's just like this regular person, and she runs into people who are generally nice to her and treat her well, and so she doesn't, turn into a monster basically and start running amok.
Yeah, she gets her French fries and she's content.
Yeah, exactly. She doesn't. Yeah, she doesn't kill any of those guys at the quickie mart or anything.
I was just gonna say that it's a sweet sort of plot twist. Not even really a plot twist, but I guess part of the plot, just basically that through her interactions, not all of the characters, whether it's Fuzz or Bonnie or even Harold and Shirley, she picks up different skills on how to deal with people and how to make her way through the world, right? So with Bonnie, she's understanding that she can't really trust fully everybody, but that she figures out how to make a little bit of money. With Fuzz, she figures. Oh yeah, what's up, John? Oh, okay.
I'll be right back. Go ahead.
That with Harold, she understands how to interact with the police, how to avoid them, and so everybody in this section of her or this part of her life are given her life skills that she will be able to use in order to survive in Detroit. And she's got a bundle of money, and she's got good hair that it wasn't a wig. Fuzz actually did a really good job doing her hair, and she's got a little bit of style now, and and she's got a sense of herself and a sense of the world. So that was nice, I did feel like I wanted to see a lot more of like what happened to her, a bigger splash maybe. But you know what? Thinking back to the movie A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, I get that title mixed up all the time. It's they're very similar stories, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just basically like a slice of life for these women with supernatural abilities as they're making their way through. And in this particular one is like the Hollywood treatment basically given to that first movie that she made.
And I love too, like with this story, obviously as Kate Hudson's character gets more greedy as the movie progresses, that's when you really start to see kind of like the investigation aspect from Officer Harold really starting to converge into it, because obviously Mona Lisa is attached to this. She's conning all these people. Mm-hmm. They're taking $500 out of the ATM, and of course the cameras are there. They're not really thinking anything of it. So the word is getting out that something is going on, and then that's when they the whole chasing really starts to like kick in, where everything's starting to close in on them. But like we have to talk about like after the frat boys get scammed. Obviously, we kind of have a falling out between Mona Lisa and Bonnie, and the frat boys end up tracking Bonnie down after one of her shifts. They corner her, in the streets basically, and they just beat the shit out of her, and like they didn't hold back. But of course, like initially, she's like, "Well, what the fuck are we like doing here?" Because she thought like they were gonna try to rape her, basically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like. The movie was awesome, but it almost kind of lost me at that point because tonally the movie is so kind of light and more kind of fun. When it got to that point, it was like, oh, this feels too dark and too real, for this movie. But then I think they handled it really well, like what happens after and what happens to the character after that I think ended up pulling me back in, where I was like, okay, cool, like I'm back in again.
Mhm.
But it just felt too
I thought it
far
was
at
really sweet
first
at the
for me.
very end
That
when
part.
Charlie and Bonnie get to reunite again at the hospital. And of course, his first reaction to seeing his mom so badly beat is, he's devastated. But she brushes it away, like that whole feeling, and starts kind of lightly scolding him, for running away. Like, she had me so scared. Basically goes into mom mode so that he can feel better about the fact that she's so brutally, beaten. So I thought that was really sweet.
Hmm. Well, yeah, and
Oh.
I want to be careful how I word this, but because it's going to be slightly spicy. Uh, it's like it kind of relates to the monkey's paw thing again, where it's like she kind of generated so much bad karma from doing the wrong thing that it was like now this is kind of like karma coming back to get her when those guys beat her up. And it sounds messed up to say that, because it's like, well, nobody deserves that. Like they could have just like taken all her stuff and taken off or whatever. And it's kind of brutal what they do to her. But then again, also on top of that, she kind of, the way the character arcs are going and the way things are playing out, her character kind of has to hit rock bottom, or else she's never going to change. Like, she's so kind of like has figured out her game in life that she's never going to become like a better person, because she has no reason to in her mind. And so to get her to that place where she can be like a real mom to her kid, she kind of has to go through this horrible experience, which, you're making a face.
My face.
That's the thing. I don't, in real life, I don't agree with this concept at all. But I think in terms of the storytelling in the movie, I feel like the filmmakers were going for this idea of her hitting
Sure.
rock bottom. When you hear about alcoholics or people who are living like really bad drug addicts, where they're not going to change or become like a better person unless like
I'm
the
not sure
absolute worst
that I
thing happens
100%
to them.
agree, and not that I
Like,
really have like a lot against what you just said, but it's I felt more that she was very brazen with the activity, right? With the thefts. So I mean, she was aware that when she was taking the money from these guys, that they were fully conscious and that they would know her, right? And so she was doing this to everybody left and right. At the ATM, even, like, they didn't spend any amount of time trying to hide from the cameras. They were just, again, just very brazen, right? And so it makes sense that it would come to this, because I mean, I've never been to New Orleans, but it doesn't sound like a huge town. So, to be burning so many bridges, and I just kind of felt like at the very end when she did reconnect with Charlie in the hospital, like, I didn't really get the sense that she learned much. I get the sense that, even when she was in that alley and, she was talking to the guys right before they beat her, she just, she knew she was up against it, and she was trying to be as calm as possible, right? And she was trying to sort of negotiate her way out of the situation. And I don't mean that with like, literally. I mean like with her tone of voice, with how casual she was. She was trying to, diffuse the situation by trying to make it more casual than they were making it. And even when she asked him, like, well, what are you gonna fuck me? And then they're like, no. And then even when she's in the hospital, like, I just felt like she was just treating it as another thing that happened in life. So I didn't really get a sense that she like changed a lot. I feel like more than anything else, it was like everything just caught up. And if anything, she might be smarter, in her future, sly endeavors. And that last scene that I mentioned with her son was just sort of, like that she's just gonna keep going to try to provide for them as much as possible. I don't know. Like that's just kind of the sense that I got from it.
No, definitely. I agree with that for sure. But I would just point out that an interesting thing about the timeline is that the son has no idea that she's been injured or is in the hospital. And even when he talks to her on the
That's
phone,
right.
there's nothing in the conversation that lets him know. So he never knows at any point that
She's mom, and she's trying to downplay
hurt
it.
badly or is in the hospital.
Yeah.
Which is smart. And that's smart writing too, because his decision to go
Not by
back to her
friendships,
is
yeah.
not based on the fact that she's injured. It's just based on the fact that she just wants to go back. He just wants to go back to her. But I do kind of feel like, because when she comes out of being unconscious in the hospital, there is definitely that aspect where she's kind of like, well, I'm just rolling with the punches, no pun intended. But she's kind of like, well, I'm moving on. Like I'm not horribly injured, so I'll heal up and keep going. But there is, at the same time that's happening, she also finds out that her son is now disappeared and she doesn't know where he is. And so I think there's maybe that moment of like, oh my God, like I am all messed up in the hospital and now my son is missing and I don't know where he is and what the hell, like now I'm in this, completely horrible situation, that kind of made her be like, I should, kind of get my shit together a little more. But I do feel like it's that my own analysis is flawed because in the movie, she really is a good mom, I think, generally. That the character arc of her becoming a better mom almost kind of doesn't quite work because I don't think she was necessarily.
I agree. And the thing is, like, at the end of the, like, if we try to fast forward from the ending to say, like, okay, say it's 2 months and the bruises are gone, although those suckers are going to stick around for a while. But what I'm saying is, like, she's healed up, there's no changing in their life other than maybe Charlie being nicer to his mom. But I mean, ultimately, like, what she's doing for a living is probably the most lucrative thing she can be doing, given her circumstances. And, it just doesn't seem like they're like what I can't think of what changes can happen other than them being, more, demonstrably, nicer to each other, right? Loving towards each other and stuff. Yeah.
Being more kind of openly, right. That's the main change. Cause really she's gonna have a hard time sort of going back to stripping because she's going to have
but she's
a lot of
good at it.
damage until she can completely heal up. But exactly, ultimately, she's probably going to go back to it because, we're obviously speculating. But yeah, there's not a huge amount of change. That's at least in terms of the story, what we're given with the story. There isn't a
maybe
big
just
place
being
for her
more,
to go in terms of changing
how
her
would you say,
lifestyle that much.
just looking forward more, because I mean everything that she did with Mona Lisa was very short-sighted, right? It was the quick the quick money versus really having like a longer term idea of how she could benefit from this. Not that I'm supporting her, using Mona Lisa to scam people, but again, it was like $500 here, $300 there. Like it's small potatoes, right? I mean, it all adds up.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that because that plays into how she lives, where basically stripping is fast, short-term money too. Like you can make a lot of money, but it's all kind of quick, short-term. You just kind of go in there and make your cash and leave. And so it's that same mindset of just
so
kind of hustling for money, kind of thing. But she does need to come up with like a more long-term plan.
If Goldie Hawn's any indication, easily into her 60s.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny that like we can even have this conversation because it just shows how good, how well this movie's written, where it has like real characters that you can actually talk about this kind of stuff, because a lot of movies, especially some horror movies, don't go to like that depth,
Yeah, we're not really talking about the characters in The
have that
Guardian and
going
what they're
on.
doing the next day.
Exactly.
That movie was bad.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, I don't think there was any character I really cared about what happened to in that movie.
Except maybe the baby.
Yeah. Yeah,
we don't want to see you become a tree carpet.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think it's funny because it's like when you mentioned earlier how Mona Lisa kind of learns skills from people and learns I think from people and is kind of like figuring out how to get through life and stuff. That's like a big theme of the movie, because when we got to the end of the movie where they go to the airport and everything, and there's that cool scene where the son realizes he wants to go home to his mom, and so you think he's gonna, for a second, you think he's gonna betray Mona Lisa to do that, and then you realize he's come up with a clever plan to help divert the police.
Yes, let's grab the nearest Asian lady.
That was so funny. And she was like, "Oh, you think all Asian people look the same?" That was so funny. And it's like awfully good coincidence that there just happened to be a young Asian lady walking by when he did that. But I was thinking during the end, it's like, for one thing, a clever thing this movie did was that people's knowledge of her never expanded to the point where like government agents were coming after her, or like larger groups of police were coming after her. She was pretty much only being investigated by the cop and his partner, basically. And their crimes were small time enough that she never attracted enough attention where it was like, she'll never be able to get away and just live her life. She'll always have people chasing after her. But they kind of didn't do that. They set it up where she really could escape.
Well, I liked how they explained it a little bit with the way that Harold managed or communicated what happened to him, right? So the guy at the reception for the institution where she escaped, he was really vocal about what she did. But Harold was very aware of how crazy that would sound, so never really told anybody. So he always came up with plausible explanations for the things that were happening to him, why he shot himself in the leg, why he handcuffed himself, or how he ended up handcuffed to a gate. But so I can, it kind of creates, plausible, a plausible outcome for why she's not being found out for being, for having supernatural powers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I love too, like when I actually get to the airport and they're just trying to find like the first flight out. They're going through like the options, and it's like, all right, you could there's a flight here to Cleveland, Ohio. I can't remember what the second one was, and then they decide to land on Detroit, Michigan. I was like, who the
Cleveland
fuck is going to choose either of those
Where
two
will I
options? Yeah, those are both terrible options and severe downgrades from where they were.
I was also thinking during that part that I feel like in this day and age, buying a plane ticket that way would raise so many red flags that they would just be like, they would just get on the phone to security and be like, someone just bought a ticket.
You can do that
with cash.
With cash for the first flight. I found like maybe you want to take a look at them, because the way things are now, like in the past, I feel like you could have done that just fine, but nowadays they're gonna call the cops on you if you pay for a ticket. If you say, "What's the soonest flight out of town? Here's cash for the ticket," they're just like,
"Oh, child,
police, hello." Wait, and I want to just. That just reminded me, I also want to just rewind about a random funny part, is when the hospital worker guy in the beginning when she's escaping the hospital, when he pushes the alarm button,
Right? Yeah.
for the when she is escaping, and it's like red sirens turn on, and it's like whir, 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 whir. It's like, I'm pretty, not to nitpick, but I'm pretty sure that's not what happens. It's a silent
Yeah, just
alarm
aggravate
that
the
calls the
situation
security,
with
like it
somebody
doesn't
who's potentially
suddenly do
dangerous,
like the
and
alarm.
there's no protection for the man behind the desk.
Mm.
There's not even like a
Yeah. And also, not to, and just to also, to kind of like deep cut nerd out for a second, when that orderly guy, or whatever, he was like the nurse orderly guy, um, bashes his head into the TV, it reminded me of Nightmare on Elm Street 3, where that takes place in the insane asylum, and the girl smashes her head, welcome to prime time, bitch. And the girl smashes her head into the TV. That's just like completely random, but to go back to the airport, it was the cool thing about this movie also that I liked was that I was thinking, when the Charlie, ends up ditching out on her, and she realizes, okay, well, I'm just going to go get on the plane and take off by myself. I was totally thinking, like, how is she ever gonna make it's like, to go back to the people under the stairs when they escaped into the world, it's like, how is she gonna survive at all in the real world? But then I thought, a testimony to how great this movie is, I think, is that it's like, well, she has, on one hand, she knows pretty much nothing about the world or how it works or people and how they work, but she has this ability that can give her an advantage, and she's a good enough person that she's not going to use it in an evil way. And so it's kind of like, oh, well, she'll be able to do it. Like she has the tools to make it in life with these big disadvantages working against her. And so there's this definite like note of hope where it's like, oh, well, on one hand, yeah, she's going to have a really hard time, but she kind of has these set of skills that will give her this advantage that will help her to live
it
like
has a very
more
hopeful ending.
normal life,
She's really
like,
excited to
not a
be
shitty
on
life,
this airplane, and like the experience of being on an airplane is a rush. That's how they portrayed it, right? Which is true. I like airplanes, but yeah, like.
Mhm.
Yes, it ends with a note of hope, but then also, to your point, like, she can control people's minds, so she'll be fine. Yeah,
Totally.
for free.
I know. She'll be able to get an apartment,
Well, but she
and
can't persuade people. She can just get them to move their
totally.
body, right? So I guess she can
I
think about it a little bit more.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
she can evict people. It's fine.
that's kind of the fun thing about her power, is that it's not like a godlike power where she can literally make people do whatever she wants. Her power is really specific. She can just sort of she can like puppet people basically,
Mhm.
but she's not really controlling their minds or their perception or anything. They're completely aware of what's happening, and they can talk and express themselves, but she can sort of puppet their limbs basically.
I have to say too, like when they were on their way to the airport and Fuzz was dropping them off, and Charlie kept like talking himself through like all of the steps at the airport to like try to like calm his nerves, and you saw Fuzz like reach into like the containers on like in the front of the car. I was like, oh my god, is he gonna drug the kid? Like, is he gonna give the kid some downers to like calm his fucking chill? But no, it was just getting like a stick of gum.
I thought he was giving him edibles at first. But I love that part, actually. I'm glad you bring that part up. That was one of my favorite parts of the movie, when he was like, here, chew gum. He's like, when you chew gum, you look calm. He's like, see? And when the kid starts chewing the gum, he's like, see? Don't you look calm when you chew gum? He's like, you look like you're in control of what you're doing. It's funny. It's just like, that was a great speech about that. And it's kind of funny, too, because it's just like, it's kind of like chewing gum, like, it's not really like true, but to someone like him, to that character, chewing gum looks cool and calm and in control. You know what I mean? Like, it's like in real life, like, not so much. In fact, there's probably a lot of people that are annoyed when people chew gum around them. But to him, he was like, that's cool, people chew gum. That's what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
awesome.
And I also love the fact that after we do the whole Asian exchange to ensure that Mona Lisa makes it onto the flight to Detroit, Michigan. Ugh, terrible place to land. Besides the point, but like when Officer Harold is like interrogating poor Charlie, he's like trying to get the answers. Like, what flight is Mona Lisa on? He lies to him initially, and then like the whole time, like his officer buddy's like trying to calm him down, like, hey man, like, maybe you're taking it a little too far. He's just a kid. And Charlie's like, I just want to go see my mom. But it's just like, just the amount of outrage coming from Craig Robinson had me laughing so hard, because it's like, man, he's really going in on this kid.
Yeah. And yeah, and I love the way his partner was like getting more and more like, come on, leave him alone. Was getting more on the kid's side and less on Craig's side during that. And that's the great thing about the way the story is done too, where the things that happen to him are so. This movie takes place so much in the real world that the things that happen to him sound totally stupid and outlandish if he says them to people, like, oh, she controlled me. She made me shoot myself in the leg. Like, you would never believe that if he told you that. You'd be like, oh, okay, you're kind of a psycho, like, And so, that's, no one will end up chasing her because nobody's going to believe him or believe the people that she did stuff to, because it's like, well, that's totally unbelievable. That would never happen. And so she's safe in that way. That's like the cool thing about the writing and the story. Because again, to say, like, to compare
this was the MCU, to be like, oh yeah,
traditional Hollywood movie. Right. And there would be government agents. The government would be aware of her, and they would be pursuing her so that they could get her and turn her into a weapon for the government, or whatever. They'd be pursuing her to capture her so they could dissect her and study her. But they don't do any of that, because in real life, nobody would ever believe you. It's like the people she robbed at the ATMs. Literally, all they did was just have the people take out $500 and hand it to them. They didn't, threaten them. They didn't do anything weird. They just were like, hey, give me $500. And the person did it. So you can't, it's like, even though that person says, I didn't want to give them the money, there's no gun, there's no evidence of any crime, really. It would be very kind of hard to prove if it went to court that they did something overtly wrong, and she could even say, I keep thinking Goldie Hawn, what's her name?
Kate Hudson.
Kate Hudson could even say, oh, like, I'm a, stripper, and he owed me money from the strip club, and so he was just paying me for that. There's all kinds of excuses. So I love the fact that it totally works in terms of the writing, that she could escape, and that in that interrogation scene, it would actually go that way in real life. They would just be like, all right, this is stupid. Like, let the kid go home and we'll keep looking for this suspect. And they probably wouldn't even look for her that hard, really, because the main cop character, he's got more of a personal thing because she made him shoot himself. And so he kind of has more of a personal grudge to catch her. Because really, they're just looking for somebody that escaped from an institution. And it's like, on one hand, while sure the police would look for someone that escaped from an institution, in
It's
real
not high
life,
priority.
People walk out of institutions and right, it's not in real life, it's not that high of a priority. And they did that in this movie really well too.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't MCU where it's like, oh my God, she's a threat to national security. And so I do also have a hot take theory that popped into my head about her as well for kind of movie or horror movie kind of connection, which is that it sort of occurred to me that she is like those characters that you see in The Grudge or The Ring, like the like Japanese and Korean horror movies where you have the young girl with the long stringy hair who can control people's minds, or in The Ring she can kind of do that stuff. Maybe she's like that, and in The Ring, that girl, she exhibits weird powers, and her parents basically give her up to a foster home or like to an orphanage, and then she, I think, is adopted, and then her parents basically throw her down the well in that movie. But in some ways, she kind of is like that type
I have to
of
say,
a character.
too, that I enjoyed the very last scene, just a little bit of closure, or a little bit of satisfaction after Kate Hudson got beat up, where the frat boys, which is what we're calling them now, are walking by the strip joint, and the bouncer recognizes them, and then just with very little emotion, just sort of like taking care of business. He's eating a hot dog. He puts down his hot dog, and he punches out two of them. I don't know why he doesn't punch out the third one, but punches out two of them, and then they're whining about their broken nose, and he goes right back to his seat and finishes his hot dog.
Yeah, that was awesome. It's like karma.
I mean, he could have thrown a couple more punches because they didn't really get what they deserved, but at least they got a little taste.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was a great character too in the movie when the cop came and was asking him if if Kay Hudson worked in there, and he was messing with him for a while and kind of playing games with him, and then he was like, yeah, she's in there, go in. And then he immediately texts her, there's a cop here looking for you. Like, that was awesome. Yeah, he was a cool character.
Yeah, gotta look out for your own, which is what he did in both occasions.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was great though that they got their comeuppance in the end. But I was wondering, because I think when they beat her up, it's possible, I think we only saw those two guys actually hitting her, that the third guy maybe didn't actually hit her or kick her. But I can't totally remember.
Was that Minnie in the room making noises?
Maybe that's what happened, but I'm not sure.
She doesn't know you're doing your podcast from home. That's his cat.
Mm-hmm. The cat.
I mean, I kind of figured.
She's complaining, but and so of course, Mona Lisa. The weird thing too, by the way, with her name is, did she ever tell anybody what her name was?
No,
because they just suddenly knew they knew her name. Like, they called her Mona Lisa, but I don't remember her ever like letting anybody know that her name was.
I liked how they say the name so much that it stops meaning the painting. I stopped, at first it's like you're thinking of, and then of course they play the song to it, the intro. But then they say her name, or at least Bonnie says her name so much that you disassociate it from the painting and you just kind of, it doesn't sound like, you know, the name of a painting. It just sounds like somebody's name. It's Mona Lisa. You can get it to Mona Lisa.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And they play the song a little bit, of course.
Yeah,
Which I thought was
not
actually
bad,
maybe
but
like
yeah, it
the
was a little cheesy.
cheesiest aspect
Can
of
you
the
pick up
movie.
Minnie?
Was
Can we see her?
actually
Or
playing
no, is she gonna
the song.
lash out? She doesn't want to be on camera, but she's a star.
She's running away. She
Of
doesn't
course.
want
Of course.
to. Minnie, come here. Come here.
Will
She's
not
like,
be showing my
like,
asshole.
no, John, I know what you do to cats on this podcast.
Oh, there she is.
Don't show them my asshole.
No butthole images.
Minnie is what, 10 or 11?
Oh, there we go.
Perfect.
Minnie.
She's 12. Time to start saving up for the
She's
quinceañera.
12. Totally.
Also, she's not a fan of mine, so yeah, put that out there. Hopefully, she didn't see me
She's
in the
like,
computer.
that's it.
Like, oh, fuck that bitch.
So on that note, obviously we don't know what happens to Mona Lisa when she lands in Detroit. Kind of left it open ended.
Yeah,
but
she'll be fine.
she has enough tools to survive on her own, no problem. I'm sure.
And they could definitely have a sequel for sure. Although I feel like the sequel would almost have to be something kind of drastically different, where it's like we see her almost like a TV sitcom, like trying to live a normal life, but sort of being an alien with superpowers. This feels a bit, I mean, the way that it kind of wasn't the traditional movie structure, it felt almost kind of like a TV show. Like it could be a Netflix 8-episode kind of series thing, you know what I mean? And it's just kind of her
that'd be neat.
Moving through, just kind of having adventures going along through life. Which this movie kind of felt like in a lot of ways. It was sort of like short stories, or in a way, having different little encounters and things. And that was a funny scene too. The like, why are you looking at my boyfriend?
Also, I feel like Kate Hudson should have been able to take that very
her.
small woman. I mean, she was very petite, and I feel like, well, I definitely could have taken her. But yeah, Kate Hudson shouldn't have lost that fight, especially when she went in with such high confidence. Yeah.
And she seems like she's probably been in some fights in her life that she should know how to fight. But yeah, great movie overall. I definitely thought it was, up there in the higher levels of current movies for sure.
Yep. Now you have a reason to go check out her earlier work, like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which is a pretty fun one. But yeah, like, it was a new release. It just came out September 30th. So it's like this past Tuesday. So, wanted to hit it out early. Because, like, this was really, like, the first week that we're like, all right, well, like, what do we want to do? Because we were all kind of, like, indifferent about, like, the Munsters. I watched it, but, like, I wasn't too impressed with it.
I thought it was fun.
You watched it?
It seems to be set up for, like, a series, right? Because, I mean, the ending was super open-ended, like, oh, we got money again, we're rich, and we're in Hollywood. So...
Or a sequel.
Yeah. And I thought it was super cute, and it just made me think how sweet it is that those actors are friends, and they've probably, been working together for decades, and I thought it was cute. But, yeah, it wasn't like, oh, it's so good. But I was just going to say the psychobilly part was pretty great. I mean, like, because at one point, he's got a band, and he's, like, the bass player and the drummer are, like, greasers, and they look pretty cool, and it was... Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely like the favorite part of the movie for me. But yeah, overall, like very
Mm.
colorful, like set designs and whatnot. But
Ooh,
kind of lackluster overall. I did watch Hocus Pocus 2
awesome! I
yesterday,
haven't seen it.
which honestly was
Yeah,
pretty good. I had a good
me
time with
too.
that. But that was also like my
I saw
childhood.
some negative
But
reviews and I was
it's
really
it's it's
scared to watch
definitely
it.
a
I
fun
haven't
one.
seen it yet because I was afraid that it wasn't going to be good. But yeah, screw the negative critics, right?
Mhm.
Except for
Yeah,
It's all
what's her name?
the same
Thorough
actors and
Birch.
everything, right?
yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
Oh,
I don't know
she.
what she's up to,
Huh,
but
yeah, I
I'm
haven't
sure
seen
she
her.
was
She
invited
hasn't been
back. But
around in
what are you
Hollywood
gonna do?
for a while. I know she's doing.
hmm So, looking ahead, next week we're going to be tackling the new Hellraiser, which is coming out on Hulu on Friday this week, which was directed by David Bruckner, who did The Night House, which was definitely at the top of my list this past year for genre releases. So, very anxious to check that one out. Have pretty high expectations. Early reviews have been, very positive. So should be a good one, and I know like we're all really amped up for that one too because it is one of the big releases. We also got like the new Chucky season starting tonight as well, so lot
Nice.
a lot of content to consume here. But I'll post the October and November schedule on our Twitter at some point this week, so you guys know what we are tackling because it's a healthy mix of things that are hidden like video on demand, theatrical or streaming releases as well. And we also have one of our first series episodes that we'll be doing as well for another highly anticipated project that will be dropping on Netflix pretty soon by a very notable horror director.
Nope,
But
I'm
yeah, I
good.
think that pretty much does it for tonight. Unless you guys have anything else on Mona Lisa.
Oh,
All
great
right.
movie.
So, with that being said, that will do it for us here tonight on Hand to Whisker. If you guys are looking to keep in touch with us over on Twitter, you can find us there at Handle Whisker. We also have all of our video content available on YouTube at Handle Whisker Pod. But for now, hope everyone goes to check out Terrifier 2 because that comes out this weekend in theaters. It's only like a 3-day thing, so keep that in mind. Hopefully, it'll be a quick digital release as well, which it probably will be, just knowing how the trend has been lately with like movies hitting streaming services and whatnot. But
Mm.
a lot of people in the community are really amped up for that, and not every day we get to see an unrated slasher in theaters either. So go check it out if you were able to. If not, rent it whenever it is readily available to you guys. But
Yay! It's
you know,
Halloween.
enjoy all the content because there's a lot to love this month, and yeah, we got
Yeah,
a lot of cool stuff coming up. So I hope you guys
yeah.
stick around for all of that as well. All right, guys, you take care.